here. I apologize, my Greek is not good enough to continue in Greek. Unlike Stefan, I would like to thank SETE to open the door also to another touristic country where I'm coming from, Switzerland, where I'm also, besides teaching, in charge of and coordinate a center with the United Nations Economic Commission for the Future of Cities. It will be a pleasure to share my insight, although very intimidating, because I'm among experts in tourism, from a city planning and urbanism perspective. I'm a city planner, I'm an expert in cities. And as very kindly mentioned previously, I got to know, obviously, above my love for this country and for this town, to work with colleagues, architects from University of Patras, a few years ago on a project of the Clinton Foundation. Out of all, a global project, a global call, a competition called Reinventing Cities. And this call was a global call, but all cities, Athens was also on the global map. Not only for the historical reasons, for the place of Athens in our civilization, but also from the fact that Athens can make a huge difference, like many other cities that were in the competition. A few months later, with our students in Geneva and in Patra, we managed to win this global competition, and it was about Kypseli. Why? Because we decided, among other things, not to impose our vision on the students, bring our students together, and make them talk, make them speak, make them dream, and based almost on that utopian vision of a neighborhood in Athens, come up with an alternative projection, and obviously as a result of that, all the schemes in terms of reinventing Kypseli. So my perspective is coming from cities. How to plan for urban sustainable transition is about anything, about planning future-oriented activity. And John Friedman is one of the lead authors in my field, where he emphasizes on the fact that planning is driven by a set of, obviously, theories and concepts, but also allocation of resources and space, as well as an ideal future. That ideal future, we should, and I stress again here, we should not be scared to be utopian. This utopian view is a gem for us. We have to keep it as much as we are rational in our mindset so that we can bring to fruition the ideal future. And this is how it works. The image that you see above from my PhD years at UCLA is the Los Angeles River that was dried up in the 1930s as a result of multiple floods. And the Corps of Engineering of the US Army proposed to the city of Los Angeles to reduce the risk to flooding by creating this channel. It's a wonderful piece of infrastructure, a lot of cement, but in the process they destroyed the river, which can play a tremendous role today in terms of reducing some of the externalities that our cities are meeting. So this example, and the image below is some of you have been and you know already, is a neighborhood in Seoul, where previously, in 15, 20 years ago, you had a double-floor, double-decker freeway, and freeway being scrapped, a river being resurfaced and engineered so that you have, to some degree, the recreation of the topography and the nature as it was before. This is the result of a utopian view with meeting also engineering solutions. And that's about the transition. The transition towards sustainability is a process or a period of changing from one state to another. It's also, and you are better involved than anyone else and know better than anyone else, is about going towards uncertainty. It's about optimizing assets while minimizing risks. And what we can say today is that on the basis of the images that you see, flooding, obviously, but also the lower photo is Santiago de Chile. During a smog day, Athens is not the exception to the rule. You also have these episodes of high pollution. The extreme weather events, we heard in detail earlier on by Professor on the impact of climate change, be it in Greece or elsewhere. As a result of the impacts of these extreme weather events, the engineering solutions that we have been devised and we've been putting up in our cities have not been able or are not able anymore to cope with the elements of change and address a variety of interactions, technical, natural, and socio-economical. So this brings me to the shift in the paradigm that we are looking in cities now, which is based on these 4 principles. The traditional tools of urban planning or urban development are unsuited to deal with the current challenges. There is a need for holistic, a comprehensive view of socioeconomic and ecological investment and integration. Direct urban resources and flows towards greater resource efficiency, energy, waste, water, food, and transport, and obviously put human beings, citizens, end users, consumers, at the heart of the current endeavors, but also think of the future citizens and communities. This brings me back to my topic, which is the cities and bringing nature in the cities. What you see above are the certain assertions, based on science or assumptions on why we need trees or more trees in our cities. Trees shade buildings, reducing the need for air conditioning, which is obviously, reduces the CO2 emissions, reduced heart attacks, strokes, and asthma. Obviously, from the mental point of view, soothing and healthier people with conducive to sports outdoor, absorb small particles, matter from the air, as well as large healthy trees obviously can improve the air quality. But all these assumptions and assertions are also based on mechanisms and policies and strategies that we had to come up with. Designing and redesigning with nature to incorporate those assets into the built environment for water supply, heating, and cooling, establish sufficiency to complement to efficiency, including the energy use and consumption, adjust the scale, scope of greening strategies to the neighborhood sociocultural needs and ecosystem particularities, scaling down urban transition strategies to smaller, lower energy scale blocks and neighborhoods. And this issue of scale is extremely important when it comes to implementing some of the sustainability strategies that we have in cities. Just one anecdote about this. When I was doing my PhD at UCLA, one of my colleagues did research with the city of Los Angeles. There was a very, very emblematic campaign, 1 million tree planting. A few years later, despite the very good will of the municipality of Los Angeles, out of that 1 million tree, only a portion, literally a portion, survived. Why? Because no one thought that they would need to go and reduce the scale of implementation, go neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community, get a sense of what are the needs of the population, but also responsibilize them towards reporting and how these trees that have been planted are surviving or not. So scale does matter. Need to move away from development paradigm into rediscovering place, skill and knowledge and local knowledge, and finally reinvest in rural places. This brings me also to the fundamental element that cities, and I would also be the vocal proponent of making your industry a place of living labs. And one of the elements that we realized, especially during COVID, is that cities can be the experimental places. Remember, we are going in this transition towards something that we don't know. And this transition is incremental. So let's try to get as much as possible information on what we are doing, the way it's being affected or impacting our businesses and our cities and our communities. And as a result, as I was saying, cities are becoming the place of experimentation in terms of the use of public space, the use of private spaces, incorporation of nature in the city, and so on. These challenges, these elements can help us, or at least trying to get a sense of what are the impacts based on data that is being produced in cities, but also, I assume, in your industry on a daily basis. Try to understand what are the challenges, update those challenges, and come up with bodies of solutions or a series of solutions that are, as much as possible, adapted to those challenges that are dynamic and evolving, and not being stuck to what we know as we started. And obviously, all that data help us also to assess capacity to scope problems across various issues. Mobility challenges is one of them, environmental degradation, public health, and circularity. This brings me back to another example of making cities really the living labs that we want them to be, and produce data so that we better understand the context and the situation. This study was done by Sensitive Lab, our colleagues at MIT, and it was, as the title says, it was about Paris, slow zones. The municipality of Paris, like many other municipalities across Europe and the world, have a very ambitious project to reduce speed in the city. So you have these slow zones that have been emblematic and very polarizing, obviously. Some are against, and others are very much for. And what our colleagues at the MIT did is use tweets from Twitter. At that time, it was much easier to use the data from Twitter as a proxy for social interaction. And what they calculated is that in those places where there's a slow zone implemented, 30 kilometers, you have a higher degree, higher number, obviously, of tweets that have been set. And as a result, or as a proxy, it's also an indication of higher interaction and socialization. And this is also an argument for the city, for the proponent of slowing down the speed in the cities, that was extremely important. And if you see this rendering, or actually the dynamic graphic, you see that in the places where it's darker, you have higher speed. In the places where you have lower speed, you have greater number of tweets, and therefore social interaction. So this brings me to Kypseli. How can we now, based on the data that is produced on daily, hourly, every minute that we are talking, how can we connect it to the reality on the ground? And here, what the reason I was sharing with you, the reason we won this competition was that we gave the voice to the students. We decided that the students, as the citizens of this city, as those who also aspire to a certain ideal of living in a city, a certain vision, need to come up with their own solution to the problems. They identified the challenges. Obviously, air pollution is one of them in Athens. In Kypseli, the question of heat island, which is you have a higher temperature because of lack or fewer green spaces, as much as many other issues that were identified as challenges. But these two challenges, heat island and also heat island and the question of air pollution were the most significant ones. And the students came up with a fantastic idea of using the soil the soil that is being excavated with the extension of the metro close to Kypseli for the greening of the rooftops and some of the courtyards and public areas of Kypseli. Obviously, this was driven from a utopian vision of how to optimize the use of natural resources in a specific area, possibly as a result, as a consequence of the legal issues and the way polykatekias are being built. It's maybe not feasible in a short term. But nevertheless, the jury identified this vision of making the soil, the earth, as a capital. And they labeled it soil capital of Athens, made them to become the winners of a vision of the cities of the future that needs to be transformed. So, the lessons learned from this experience, please do listen to the youth. The youth is a priceless, valuable, most valuable voice for the visions of tomorrow, but also in terms of identifying or pinpointing the identification of the challenges on the ground. This brings me back to tourism. Again, Switzerland, as you can see, country of many, small country, but nevertheless very prosperous when it comes to the promotion of its tourism, take stock of these visions these voices of the youth, among others, there has been a multiple rounds and lengthy process of consultation of various communities to understand what are the challenges in Switzerland and what are the solutions that they can converge towards a new vision, a new aspiration, but also a new image of tourism. And this is sustainability, Swisstainability, which is about integrating elements that are driven by these vulnerabilities. Air pollution, obviously, and CO2 emissions is about promoting soft mobility or public transit. It's about preservation of water resources. 6% of European water, soft water, are coming from the glaciers of Switzerland. Nature conservation, biodiversity being one of the biggest concerns, or lack of, or loss of biodiversity is one of the biggest concerns of the youth and all other communities. They wanted to emphasize on that as much as air quality, local food system, local production, and recycling. And this is what Swisstainability is. I just want to show you a very short video that really exemplifies and illustrates how you can bring all these elements together from the identification of risks and vulnerabilities and build up an image, an aspiration, and also project it to the outside world based on these very systematic local issues. If you can launch the video, please.
How far we've come. Our curiosity has taken us around the planet. We've traveled over land, water, and through the air with fire in our hearts. We used to travel to arrive. Now we travel for its own sake. Here in Switzerland, we've created endless hiking trails, spectacular bridges, and built cable cars that reach the highest peaks. We've always cared deeply for nature. Our love for nature is in our DNA. Sustainable travel comes naturally to us. What others see as a distant goal, for us, comes as standard. It's time to give this standard a name. We call it Swisstainable. Swisstainable stands for excellence. Swisstainable serves as a blueprint, because we know that when nature is left untouched, the more it can touch us. And that's something worth preserving for generations to come. It's time for a new way of traveling. Over land and water, through the air, with plenty of fire in our hearts.
So as you can see, the Swiss tourism really dig deep in understanding what are the concerns that the population have, but also the communities that live in the proximity of the touristic areas, but also tourists themselves. What is this aspiration? What they would want to see in years to come in Switzerland as a result of the development of tourism. Really digging deep in what are the local particularities, the food system, the water issues. As I said, 6% of the water of Europe is coming from Switzerland, from the glaciers. They are melting fast. Switzerland is facing another problem with water, which is we have too much water. Glaciers are melting, and each season, with one unseasonal rain, we get flooded, lakes overflow, and this is something that we have to take care of. So as a result of that, they came up with a very progressive and also very, to some degree, some risk associated to that, promotion of Swiss tourism, different sites, based on those elements and reversing the course towards vulnerabilities, coming up with a solution or series of solutions that fed the tourism strategy of labeled as a sustainable local food consumption and production, water conservation, use of trains and public transport and facilities, and so on and so forth. So you see that digging deep in local particularities, excessively important. Swisstainable, as after 2.5 years, almost 3 years, is a success story already. My niece, she's 22 with her boyfriend, said very proudly, I used sustainable last year in between seasons, where the hotels are not as full as in winter and in summer, to go to the Italian part of Switzerland, taking the train, not emitting, they're reducing CO2 emissions, obviously, eating local food, consuming locally, and doing sustainable activities, whatever those were. And this has become a tidal wave in terms of promotion of sustainability in Switzerland. And I want to end up on these few elements that will conclude my, my conversation is about looking towards future. One of the elements besides identification of these vulnerabilities and local particularities is we have to be connected with the outside dynamics, with the global dynamics. As we discussed, it was discussed in length today, SDGs do matter, Agenda 2030 obviously does matter, but we have also to look at what is coming up next. What is coming up next is the Future Summit in New York before the General Assembly in 2024, as convened by the Secretary General, Guterres, is to see what can we do with what we have not achieved in terms of sustainability. This is labeled as a SDG 2.0 or the Futures Pact. There are multiple names, but we should keep that in mind while trying to localize as best as possible, to reduce scale of implementation as best as possible. We have to look at what is coming up next at the global scale. Secondly, make data your culture. Don't be afraid of using whatever data at your disposal, but also think creatively of how you can produce new sets of data with what we have. And mobile communication is one of the best elements, but also other sources of data that are at our disposal. This also gives us the capacity, and this is the link with the Future Summit, to maximize our capacity of foresight, strategic intelligence, and scenario building based on the data that we have at our disposal. Involve stakeholders of today, obviously, but also of future, and take stock of their aspirations and visions for the way they project themselves, the living environment that they want to have, and this is the example of engaging the youth. And obviously, as I said, localize global dynamics as much as possible, at a smaller scale possible, to really take stock of the priceless and valuable, most valuable local socio-environmental systems at our disposal. Greece is the best example. The wealth of socio-environmental systems and particularities from the regional perspective all the way to historical and the elements of culture and diversity that really illustrate the wealth of the wealth at our disposal today to capitalize on. I thank you for that, for the conversation and for the discussion, giving me the opportunity. Thank you.